what you're describing really reminds me of what Henry Ford talked about in 1921, Nikola Tesla, Hayek, Fuller. There are many others that predicted this many decades ago. You're talking about the telegraph, the global connection, internet era, all that. Looking back at those very early people, decades ahead of their time, do you think they would be pro Bitcoin? And assuming that you think they are, why do you think that they would believe Bitcoin is the answer to what they were describing in the past?
So I do think they would. Um, Hayek said basically, I forget the exact quote, but he's like, we're not going to have good money until we take it out of the hands of government. We can't take it out of the hands violently, but we can only just introduce something sly and roundabout that we can't stop. I mean, that's literally Bitcoin. That's literally Satoshi. So he couldn't have, he basically described Bitcoin before it came. Ford talked about Bitcoin backed, money backed by energy. So did Fuller. Um, some people fall into the trap of they envision something, and then if something comes along that's not exactly what they envisioned, they resist that thing. So, and I would hope that none of them would have fallen into that trap to be like, like they become like kind of salty anti-Bitcoiners because it's not exactly what they envisioned or something. But aside from that trap, yes, I think all those people would have appreciated Bitcoin if they were here and around to see it. They all had the types of minds that understood it. They understood, many of them understood the kind of perils of the banking system. Ford talked about that, and Hayek, of course, had plenty to write about that. Um, and so I think basically the shared kind of conception there is that rather than money being determined by a kind of small set of, leaders and the ability to kind of opaquely dilute one group and give it to another group, or just, kind of just arbitrarily do whatever they want without kind of much pushback. It's basically saying that money is resource constrained. And they some of them refer to energy specifically because energy is probably the purest type of resource constraint that we know of. But basically, it's a way of saying that money is honest, and energy is honest. I mean, the rules of physics are the most honest thing we have, and so to the extent that you can more directly attach money to energy, not in terms of abstraction like credit. It's one thing to have a promise. Okay, here's a banknote that's backed by something that actually takes energy to make, versus the actual money itself is efficient and fast and useful enough that it's directly tied to money itself. And of course, there still could be, credit-based abstractions and things like that to help scale it or to help make it more convenient, but that the actual money itself has enough of those characteristics that it really kind of is hard to rehypothecate, hard to manipulate, and can kind of stand on its own 2 feet.
You mentioned how you hope that they wouldn't have fallen into that trap of having a vision, Bitcoin not aligning with that vision, and then getting distracted by that. I think we see that with a lot of the very smart people of our day, right? There are many famous people that are not pro Bitcoin and fall into the trap of crypto, proof of stake, all that. What would be your summarization for those that perhaps are getting distracted by that of why Bitcoin is unique, why Bitcoin, there's not going to be a second iteration of Bitcoin? Like, what prevents someone from making a better version, or what Lindy effect does Bitcoin have that these other things don't?
I mean, I think there are a couple different ways. I mean, one is so Bitcoin versus crypto, I think is, part of it's just sheer grift and things like that. But if we take the most honest forms of them, right? So the ones that are honestly trying to try new things, experiment. I think we basically divide into two sections. One is that are we trying to fix the money, or are we trying to fix finance first and foremost? To some extent, we're trying to fix both. But I think what we see in the broader crypto space is it's less about the underlying unit and more about how can we trade things more efficiently, or how can we, kind of do this or do that, and less about the underlying unit of itself. So in the modern era, because our money's so weak, we monetize other things, right? It could be the stock market, it could be real estate, it could be, whatever the case may be. And I would say the Bitcoin community is more focused on fixing the money and kind of takes the idea that finance can fix itself later, like basically on fix the money first, and around that finance will be improved. Whereas crypto is, I think, less engaged in monetary theory and things like that, and more like how can we make a better decentralized trading environment or something like that, which in my opinion is the much smaller problem to solve. It's still, there are areas where that could be interesting, and I would like to see some of that on Bitcoin, but that's in my view a much smaller problem. So I think that's largely its own thing. And then there's this other people who are very intelligent, but then they see Bitcoin and I mean, they're kind of in the more of the no coiner camp often, where they just kind of say this newfangled technologies is not doing it. It's not, maybe they view specifically that money has to be gold, for example, it has to be physical, and they're really hung up on that aspect of it, which I think is incorrect, but that's kind of what they're hanging up on. Or maybe they have like a pet economic theory that you need some inflation, but just not much, and then like the fact that Bitcoin's absolutely scarce is a problem, or there's any number. If there's some metric that they prioritize a little bit too strongly, and they're not just kind of open-minded and flexible enough, they can sit there and say this isn't it, right? It's not flexible enough. It's not private enough. It's not XYZ enough. And I think what they're doing is they're overstating their own view of the monetary world rather than kind of letting the market show them and try to learn from the market what makes good money. And two, they're kind of discounting probably too heavily the impact of network effects. Um, and so, for example, with an engineering background, I focus on protocols. Why do we have Ethernet for 50 years? Why do we have USB for 25 years? Why do we have Internet Protocol for how many decades that's been around? Does it mean that we can't build something marginally better than them? Probably not. I mean, probably could marginally improve them. And, those things themselves do upgrade. I mean, Ethernet's not the same as it was 50 years ago. USB is not, it's on USB 3.0 rather than 1.0. They do upgrade over time. But if you're trying to start a new protocol, I figure out how to I made Ethernet that's 10% better than current Ethernet, right? It's like the form factor is just a tiny bit better, and this is better. I'm starting from such a massive disadvantage because every device in the world has an Ethernet port, and it doesn't have my port, right? And so 10% better is not going to cut it unless I can find something that's just so dramatically better. It's a non-starter. The best I can do is hope that Ethernet will see my technology and incorporate some of it into its own for the next Ethernet improvement, right? And so that's, I think, where we are with Bitcoin, which is that it has some potential upgrades to make either on the base layer or higher layers, but it achieves such liquidity, such network effects, that clearly that's the one we should be leading into, if we understand network effects, protocols, and things like that. And so I think the shortcoming there is that people let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If it doesn't perfectly match their platonic ideal of money, they're like, that can't be it. And rather than saying, okay, it's maybe not what I expected it to look like, but I'll learn from it. It's what the market's deciding, and then maybe it changes what their own perception of perfect money looks like. Like I didn't know what perfect money looked like. I saw Bitcoin and I was like, well, that's the best money I've seen. So, you know,
Yeah.
going with that.
I hope that you're enjoying this conversation with Lynn, both being really useful and reassuring for you. What makes Lynn so special to me is her ability to think critically from a first principles standpoint with an engineering background, as well as being able to communicate those thoughts clearly and concisely. I happen to agree with her. Number one, I happen to agree that market cap is set at the margins downwind of price, and therefore Bitcoin's price in terms of US dollars could appreciate incredibly rapidly, perhaps by orders of magnitude in each coming cycle. Secondly, I happen to agree that a lot of rehypothecation and fake paper Bitcoin and yield products are ahead of us. I think volatility will continue. And therefore, number three, I happen to agree with her that I think self-custody is really important for you to consider and really important for you to consider urgently. And number four, Lynn and I both talk about how collaborative custody, multi-sig solutions could be a viable option for many people in the coming future. And so, if you have an interest in taking self-custody, if you have an interest in setting up a multi-sig solution and collaborative custody partnership, I do work at the Bitcoin Advisor precisely for this purpose because I think it is the future. You can find me in the link in the description below at the Bitcoin Advisor, where our primary goal is to help you securely transition your Bitcoin off exchanges into your own hands and into your own self-sovereignty. It's really important that you begin considering what happens to you in the event that you lose your seed phrases, what happens to you in the event that you pass on. Will your children, your loved ones, your company, your spouse, whomever your descendants are, what happens to them if your keys have issues or have troubles and have maintenance. So if you want someone to help you through that process, one-on-one, to create a multi-sig vault, to help you create an estate plan, to be an ongoing collaborative custody partner, and help reassure you in the face of all these products and all these innovations happening to Bitcoin atop the base layer, if you want to have someone assist you in the coming years and hopefully coming decades, Bitcoin Advisor could be a good place for you to consider. If you go to the link in the description, you can learn more about me and why I'm personally there as well. And I will send you dozens of pages of free documents, both about our company specifically at the Bitcoin Advisor and multi-sig and collateral custody in general. Purely educational content for you to learn about. Dozens of pages with great content, great perspectives, ideas, and thought-provoking perspectives for you to consider in the coming months and years as you take more and more of your Bitcoin into self-custody. So not only, again, do you get information about collaborative and multi-sig custody in general, and you also get information about the Bitcoin Advisor specifically. Also, I'm happy to send you, or you'll find a link below, a comparison of what Bitcoin Advisor does compared to our competition, what we provide, and our goal is to provide 10 times the value for half the cost. So if you have an interest in multisig, I strongly encourage you to consider it now. More and more companies are only going to have the option of multisig. See, a company or a charity or a church cannot pursue the option of a single sig solution. They have to pursue multisig solutions. So as an individual, as a company, or as a board of a charity or church, whatever the case, if you're interested in a multi-sig solution for the long term, for cold storage, I highly encourage you to start doing so now. Whether that's with me at the Bitcoin Advisor or elsewhere, I strongly encourage you to do it because that rehypothecation will continue, Bitcoin's rapid price appreciation will continue, and in those events, demand will skyrocket for these precise kinds of services and for time with people that are experts in this field. So, again, once more, please check out the link in the description for the Bitcoin Advisor where you can find me. You can schedule a meeting with me. You can book a free consultation with me there. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Again, happy to send you dozens of pages of free complimentary information for you to learn more about your Bitcoin and learn more about your Bitcoin self-custody solutions. Because again, whether you work with me or not, it's far more important. Please just consider taking self-custody as soon as possible. Link in the description. Thanks. That's a great framework to have, that you have your vision of what it is, and then you let the free market, you let the network effects of the free market inform you what it's telling you is the best money. So I think that's a great framework. One of the things that people often bring up to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is if one of the perceived imperfection of Bitcoin is the diminishing impact of the halving. And, there's not going to be enough Bitcoin to subsidize this network, or, each halving is going to have a diminishing impact on price appreciation, all that. And so that's a very common concern people have. So what would you say to people that have that concern about every cycle, perhaps having a diminishing impact on Bitcoin, the network at large?
So overall, it still has the same percentage impact. So anytime Bitcoin has a equilibrium where there's kind of a roughly approximate demand incoming for new supply incoming, if that kind of finds an equilibrium price and then the new supply gets cut in half, that still is impactful. Smaller percentage of the current network than it used to be. But it's also, there's other variables that are kind of dampening as well. So if the demand is being less crazily impacted, if a billion people use Bitcoin compared to a million people use Bitcoin, the demand is more steady. And so a smaller supply change can impact the price more.